Sammy.
I'm Spencer Robbins, and we run A Life of Free.
If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, like, and share it with a friend.
Do it. Do it now.
Do it.
Do it.
All right, y'all. What's up? Welcome to our channel.
What we're going to be talking about today are the stages of vulnerability in dating. We're going to be talking about what a lot of Christians do in Christian circles while dating, when they share too much too soon.
Yes,
Yeah.
what we've seen.
What we've observed, and how we believe you can go about dating in a really healthy way, having boundaries, sharing vulnerability in proper time. And so it's going to be a good one today.
So this is about when and how to be vulnerable in dating.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about first some of the things that we see in Christian circles.
Why don't we talk about you and all your problems?
I have so many. It's going to be too much on the video.
Okay. I will start with vulnerability. I will lead vulnerability in this. I will talk about the different ways that I dated, which actually encompass a lot of the ways that Christians date horribly wrong.
Well, what I want to start by doing is actually by sharing, why we're creating this video. Is one, we had a girl that commented on one of our YouTube videos asking what are proper stages of vulnerability in the dating process. We thought it was a really good question. Yeah. And I know that there are a lot of people that say this is the way that it should be done, or this is how you have to do it. And ultimately, we're going to give some feedback.
But we're not telling you what to do. We're not saying it's the right way. We're giving people who are hungry for practical steps and tools and just want to learn and glean. We're just extending what we have discovered since dating messy and then dating well. We're giving you what worked for us and what we've actually seen has been a good trend for our clients.
Yeah, totally. We have 2,000 women that have gone through our programs, and we've seen a lot of the big messes that can happen and a lot of the huge victories that can happen when you do things well. And so we want to give some observations, give some feedback, and kind of talk about why this is an important subject.
So we're brainstorming about some of the things that we feel like are really healthy, important factors in bringing vulnerability into dating and doing dating well. And so we're just going to be talking back and forth.
Well, one of the things that I was thinking is that as a man, one of the things I wanted on the first few dates was just fun.
Yeah.
I want to be able to find out if we have chemistry.
Can we connect? And
not go super deep to have to connect.
Yeah.
I don't want us to have to go really deep
sharing
and vulnerable.
Our stories and sharing our process.
I also felt really shut down when I feel like the girl brought this expectation that I want to find somebody to marry.
Yeah.
And brought that up super fast because
feels like a lot of pressure.
It felt like we can't just get to know each other, have fun, find out if we're friends or not friends, or we can't just part ways. And I feel all this pressure if I say no to you on our second date, that it's going to shatter your world.
Yeah.
And it's and that's also what happens when someone's way too vulnerable too fast, is it creates a scenario where it leaves them overly exposed in something that hasn't been proven as a safe environment.
Because you let someone into a place in your heart that they might not want to be in yet.
Yeah.
So a big part of for us in this process and the content we want to make for this is figuring out what's the marriage between bringing vulnerability, but also not too much vulnerability. How can you show up and be open and expose who you are without investing too much, without letting them in too much, without oversharing? Because when you do that, it creates a lot of connection and emotional attachment really early on. And even if the man matches that, or even if he leads in that and you match him, but that happens really early in relationship, that amount of emotional connection typically leads to a lot of overcommitment. And that overcommitment is scary. You'll typically get triggered. Both of you have different triggers. You'll typically trigger each other, and that relationship will crumble as fast as it started most of the time. That's not always true, but it happened to me. And it actually happened to you too at some level, right?
I mean, I did a lot of dating, so I have a lot of stories.
And so it's figuring out what's that balance between me showing up and being vulnerable and being open and not being walled off and disconnected, but also not bringing too much vulnerability too fast that speeds the relationship at an unhealthy pace.
But that brings us right back to that thing we were just talking about, which is that if you are not on a process of being vulnerable in your own life with God, with good friends, you're not going to know how to manage any of your vulnerability in any relationship.
If you're not connected to your heart, then you won't know what's vulnerable and what's not vulnerable. When you're connected to your heart and you're on that process of self-awareness, you can decide and assess in a moment, is this too much vulnerability to bring in the first few dates? Does this feel overly exposing? Or is this a healthy level of like, no, I'm actually just being transparent. This is just a fact I'm sharing with you.
I've noticed there's two spectrums with people that I've seen in dating. Is there's a spectrum of people that are completely unaware of themselves, the way they come off, their vulnerability, their expectations, their triggers. Like, men might be evil in their heart and they don't even know it. They may still have tons of pain towards dad or be really disconnected. And that's one side of the spectrum. Then there's the other side of the spectrum where, like, they know so much about game. They know how to play the game of relationship. They know how to say really emotionally healthy sounding language. Yeah. They can talk the talk and logically be able to talk about healthy spiritual things, their healthy relationship with God.
They can say all the right trust building things that lead you into an impression that's not actually true for them.
And usually those people desperately need to be liked or impressive or significant. Yeah. And
they're using that dating relationship to get their needs met, essentially. Even if they think that they're on the journey of finding a future wife, that's not always the case.
Or a future husband, right?
Yeah. I was thinking about men doing that. But women do that too.
I've noticed that especially.
Another thing that I was thinking about is like finding ways, and I want you to give practicals if you think of it, but finding ways to test so you can create clear expectations. So you were saying like fun was really important to me. Having really low stakes, us just figuring out, do we connect? Can we have fun? Before we ever talk about, you were telling me before we started recording that you would get shut down if you heard a woman say, I'm just looking for my husband. Yeah. Because it felt like a ton of pressure.
I'd be like, that sounds like I'm going to fail you already.
But for me as a woman, I'm thinking, well, it was really important for me to have clear expectations and to test figuring out what this guy's motive and intention was for dating. Because there'd be good Christian guys that were exploring and they were really excited about having a future wife, but they weren't ready for commitment at all. And there were other guys that I met that they weren't even thinking about marriage at all. They just wanted a girl to be by their side and to get their needs met with.
To get some.
They wanted to get some. And that was like before my Jesus days.
But well, even the Christian guys want to get some, but it's not sexual stuff.
They want to get all their emotional needs met.
Yeah.
But figuring out what a man's motive and expectation is in relationship and testing that so that you can figure out how to posture yourself in relationship. And we're both huge advocates. I didn't learn this until Spencer because I made everything high stakes, I think. But we both have a huge value for how do I set myself up in relationships for it to be low stakes? Like, how do I not put a ton of pressure on this, a ton of expectation, or bring a ton of energy into this so that we can have a healthy, natural building and progression of relationship?
One of the things that I always shared on a first date that made it really enjoyable was, hey, like, I know that we're out at coffee. I asked you out. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you and get to know you and see if we, like, connect. But I just want to let you know the way that I do things is I really like to keep things casual in the beginning. Really, just low stakes. I want to get to know you. I want us to have fun.
Take notes, man. Take notes.
And I would set my goal and intentions so that they knew the way that I functioned in dating too, so they could manage their own expectations.
Yeah.
I'd let them know, like, hey, I'm a marathoner on anything.
Yeah.
So I want to have fun. I want to have, like, lighthearted conversation. And so my goal isn't that this is a high-pressure thing that we're figuring out how to get from A to B as fast as possible. Yeah. That scares me in the dating process. And I would love for you just to know that no matter what happens, I'll communicate with you what I want and what I don't want.
Yeah.
So, like, I will let you know that so that you can just decide at any point during this if you want to choose out or keep choosing in.
It's amazing.
I don't like games. I want us to be able to be honest. And so
And
just want to let you know
here's
that.
the thing. I know I have men that watch this channel. We right now are only working with women. And so a lot of you women are probably hearing that and you're like, God, I wish a guy would freaking do that with me. I wish I had clear communication. Or maybe you're like, I would hate if someone just said what Spencer said. I don't know. Yeah. I love it. I love clear communication because I know how to show up whenever there's a lot of communication and clarity.
Yeah.
And so with this, you might be thinking and feeling like, well, I'm a woman. Like, how do I lead in that? You know, like, do I just have to wait for a guy to show up like that? You can show up with clear communication too.
You can ask questions.
Yeah, you can ask questions, you can get clarity, but you can also, you're not leading the pace of relationship if you decide to fully show up. But also, I think that takes going on a process of figuring out, like, what is healthy communication? What are healthy boundaries? So how do I communicate in a way where I'm not being codependent, where I'm not putting pressure on him, and where I'm not trying to lead the relationship?
The nature of dating, if we're talking about vulnerability, the nature of dating is already vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because you're saying yes to some stranger.
Yeah.
To get to know them. You're putting your heart on the line a little bit to let hope, like, to let your hope grab onto something.
Yeah.
You know, you're entering into something that's by nature is vulnerable. And I think if you pay attention to what is going on in you on a date, that's a really good place to start if a guy is not, you know, necessarily leading the way that you want him to. There's probably a lot of triggers you may need to work through before you go into dating if you feel triggered nonstop in dating.
Yeah.
If you go on dates and you just feel triggered, or even the thought of dating feels really high stakes, you probably need to get some leadership.
If that's you too, and you're hearing all of this and you're like, I know I need to go on a deeper journey, click the link below in the description. Click our workshop, watch our workshop, and if you're interested, if it resonates with you, look into our programs. We dive into this deep process for you to get to go on a journey. And ultimately, the goal of our courses is to get you really healthy so that you feel prepared and powerful to do relationship well. And so if that's you, click that link.
But if you're on a date and you're just noticing like, oh my gosh, I feel walled up, or I feel really shut down, or I can't be myself on this date, or I'm trying to connect and I was able to with my friends just before this, but now all of a sudden I'm out with this guy and I can't. That's great stuff to share with them. In a not overly vulnerable way. You can just ask questions like, hey, I just want to let you know, for some reason dating feels vulnerable for me. Yeah. And I know this is just a first date and I don't want you to feel like I'm projecting a bunch of expectations on you, but I think something that would be helpful for my heart to hear just right now and is the way that you do dating. Like, are you kind of like a sprinter? Are you a marathoner? Like, are you wanting to just have fun and connect? Like, what are some of the things that feel fun in the beginning and the ways that you go about dating? And if the guy is connected to himself and is a leader, I think he'll respond like, wow, just getting straight to it. Yeah. Okay, I like that. Here's some of the stuff that
and let me pause you. That's not you pursuing a man either. And I have a huge value for letting the man pursue and letting the man lead. There's actually something innately in men where there's this thing in them where they want to hunt and pursue and conquer. And so if a woman steps into that and starts leading and pursuing, I know there's a lot of flack that I might get against that. And I'm a very powerful woman. I'm very strong. I communicate. I know what I want. I did that even while we were dating. Yeah. But you can still be powerful and not lead the relationship. But for those of you who are like, I don't want to lead the relationship, I want the man to take the reins.
Like, I want to be pursued and loved and chosen the rest of my relationship. That's how you need to start. But
you asking questions is actually you bringing vulnerability too.
It's you pursuing your own heart.
It's not you leading the relationship. And so I just want to like clarify that. And on another side note with asking questions, I think asking questions is a great way in dating to have you fully show up, but to get a lot of information to learn that person. And by asking questions, it's actually a really good tester to see if you're going to have a man who's going to reciprocate that or lead in that. Yeah. It's a huge red flag for me when I'm in like communication with anyone and they're trying to get to know me if they don't bring questions to me. Because whenever we're having an exchange where we're asking each other questions and we're reciprocating with each other, we can unfold. I remember Spencer said to me when we were just friends, he said, part of the purpose in dating and in pursuit is that the more a woman is pursued and the more she's seen, she's like a flower and she actually blooms and opens up. The more you love her, the more you pursue her, the more you woo her, the more you actually get to see who she is, like a flower that blooms. And that marked me a lot. I remember noting that I had never heard that before, and I remember loving that perspective and feeling safe with you, because I was like, oh, you're going to pursue whoever you're with, and if I was thinking about dating you, you would pursue me and you would understand that your pursuit would help me open up. And so asking questions is a great way to engage someone, to also bring vulnerability, but to also test where they're at and if they're going to bring interest to the table, if they're going to bring curiosity about you, so that you guys can actually get to know each other.
If you're, like, dating is going to feel way too, like, when I say high stakes, it means it feels too vulnerable, where you feel like you can be destroyed at any second.
Yeah.
Or you can destroy the other person at any second. And so that's way too high stakes. It means that, you know, that you've given away your power over your life. And so, like, one of the things that I think is really huge is identifying, do I feel like men have the power to make me feel rejected or unloved? Mm-hmm. You know, if you felt like really reactive towards men in dating, like big anger, like your outer critic is saying, like, there are no men that are safe, like, there are no great men, that tells me that you're living in a lot of powerlessness, and there's actually a deeper heart journey you need to go on separately that a guy can't fix for you.
And to give you understanding really quickly with, like, the outer critic, because you just dropped that down, like, a lot of us have an inner critic and or an outer critic, and that inner critic is the voice that tears you down, says you're inadequate, you'll never be enough, da-da-da-da-da. It often sounds like the voice of your mom or your dad and the way that they talk to you. And the outer critic, it looks outwardly at the world and it blames and it accuses, and all that is you've adopted at some point in your life, because of pain, a protector. So that voice that says men will never be safe and they'll never be trustworthy, and I'm going to blame them, accuse them, disqualify them, tell myself that they're the reason everything is bad in the world, it means you have a really strong protector inside of you that's trying to prevent future pain from happening.
It's us trying to reason our pain away. Yeah, so that's something that I would recommend. If you feel some of that big energy, going on your own heart journey, and that's the same for men too. Yeah. We happen to have a lot more female audience than men.
Another thing too, and we're just I think I'm going to use this, but we're just kind of bullet pointing a few different things that are going to be helpful, and we're making it very conversational, obviously, rather than teaching it to you. But I think another thing that Spence was saying is, like, too many times we see people learn emotional health and learn communication and learn these skills, and at a head level. At a head level, yes, and then we use it to weaponize. We use it as a weapon in relationships. So will you tell me about what you mean by that?
What I mean is, like, I'll hear people listen to a ton of emotional health podcasts, or even watch our videos, and if it stays here
in your head,
and you can logically go, oh, this is what I need to say in relationships, or here's what I need to communicate, and it stays here, you're not actually allowing it to sink into this place where you're being vulnerable with people, you're being vulnerable with God, you're working through your past pain, your triggers, you're taking ownership for your pain in your life, and finding out more about it, getting help and leadership. If you're not in that process, it's going to stay here at a head level. So, like, what I've seen is people know all the right things to say. You know, I was connecting with my heart and blah, 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 blah. Yeah. You know, or internally I felt, or like I can connect with, like, there's just all this language. There's all this lingo language. Like, I'm sure if you've been around church long enough, there's all this Christianese language that you know how to talk, right? And you know, you never walk up to some stranger and talk about prophesying, you know, or maybe you do, and that's fine. But it's not something that people understand. But if you go on, like, an actual journey for yourself, you can take ownership. That language is not used to weaponize other people. Like, even in relationships, there's times where I'm like, we both told each other, "You're triggered. This is your dad pain. This is like..."
And then I'm like, "You're telling me about me right now."
Well, you're triggered, and you're trying to fix me like you did with your mom.
It's all in order to prevent pain
all the
when it comes
psychobabble.
down to it.
Yeah.
And another thing that I'll say too is if you have a lot of head knowledge, or you know someone that has a lot of head knowledge, and all of us do. We all have a lot of things that we know in our head.
This is a problem that we go through all the time.
Yes, that we don't actually know in our heart. I was talking to my friend Abby the other day, and we were having a conversation, and she was like, "Well, I've shared this specific thing with you over and over again because I can tell that you know it in your head, but you don't know it in your heart." And I just was like, "Oh, okay, true." Like, I thought she kept telling me because she thought I just didn't get it. And I'm like, "No, I get it. I understand." But she's like, "No, you just don't know it in your heart yet." And it's true. And it's true for all of us always. But the more we go on the process, what Spence is saying is the more you go on the process and you actually apply those tools over and over and over again, that's when that information actually moves from your head, which is in an intellectual way, down to your heart, which is in an experiential knowing. And so if you're not going on a process, you probably too have a lot of emotional lingo or Christian lingo that you think you know all the answers to, that your heart doesn't actually know from experience because you haven't lived it out. So we just encourage you, go on the journey. It will make you a lot more trustworthy, and it will make connections so much easier in dating, engagement, and marriage.
And one of the things that I'll just say as we're closing things up is, like, we talked a lot about the beginning process, right? Like the first few dates. I would say, after a few dates, there's this point where you need to start paying attention to what your heart is needing. And it's not acting. If you come into a dating process like there's a right and a wrong way to do it, that's going to create a lot of unnecessary tension for you and for the other person, because you're going to be projecting all of your expectations on what's right. And what comes with that are a lot of judgments and accusations when they don't line up to what's right.
And that could look like you having this ideal in your head of what dating needs to look like, how the guy needs to pursue you, what the progression has to be. You may bring in a lot of expectations, which we all carry that in relationship. We all think that there's a way that it should be based on what we've seen before. And when you do that, it actually puts the guy or the other person that you're doing relationship with in a position where they actually don't know how to show up fully. That expectation in relationship will only lead to disappointment.
Absolutely. So instead of coming into it with, like, there's a right and wrong way to do relationship, it's you taking ownership for what your heart's needing.
Yeah.
So like, I remember at one point there was a girl that I was dating that we got ice cream one night, and we went back to my house, and we were going to watch a movie or something, and this girl was a Christian, but at one point she dropped her clothes in front of me, and I just sat there for a second, and I was paying attention to what my heart was feeling, and obviously as a guy that likes, is gonna be drawn to what, like, a girl's naked body. As a guy, I was like, I need to pay attention to my heart though, so that I'm not living from a place of like this surfacey desire. Yeah. And I immediately felt shut down internally, and I just felt like, oh my gosh, like physically it was a really cool moment, but internally I didn't want that. Yeah. And I just felt like a little boy that was shut down, and so I didn't feel safe. And so I told her, I was like, I need you to put your clothes back on. I'll be waiting for you downstairs. And she felt super rejected and ended the dating process. But I was paying attention to what my heart needed. And it wasn't me going, you're so bad for doing that. I have all this judgment towards you as a woman. Like, you're such a bad person for doing that. It's like, I didn't want to bring that into that process and shame somebody for their normal, even though it was unhealthy and there was an unhealthy thing that she was living in. For me, I had to pay attention to like what my heart was needing. Yeah. And so if like that's an extreme example, but I feel like something that women can do to be powerful is to ask questions, and maybe like try and figure out for yourself what's something that is what are things that I need to be navigating in my process with God, and then what are legitimate things that I need to know throughout this journey that I can ask the guy questions in a lighthearted way, like, hey, we're 6 dates in. I'm just curious, where, what your direction is for this, what you're feeling. Like, I would love to just have a dialogue about what's
Just
going
be
on in
open.
your world, what you're willing to share, and I'd love to share where I'm at too.
And I think a huge game changer for me was not letting my level of vulnerability exceed where I was at in relationships. So I'll give you an extreme example. If you're dating or you're newly dating and you haven't talked about marriage yet and you guys aren't talking about the future yet, which is good and normal and healthy, it would be really odd to talk about sexual preferences, what your expectations are in marriage, what your expectations are for sex, what you would want to explore in sex. That would be an unhealthy level of vulnerability, because in that you're actually bringing a lot of sexual energy and sexual excitement, and you're letting them into your world too much for where you're at if you're newly dating or just dating. Now, it'd be healthy if you guys were engaged and you're going down the aisle soon, right? Because you need to have that conversation, because that level of vulnerability, which I'm talking about sex is an extreme level of vulnerability in relationship. If you're about to cross that bridge and be in that level of vulnerability, it's really healthy to have conversations about that. But I wouldn't even have that conversation fresh into engagement. I'd have that conversation whenever you're about to get married, so that you're not awakening too many things and connecting like that too early, because it makes it really hard.
Yeah.
Literally. And so that's an extreme example, but you want your level of vulnerability that you're bringing to exceed or to match where you're at in relationship. You don't want it to exceed it, otherwise it will progress too quickly. And when it progresses too quickly, it might feel like, for me, I knew that I wanted a lot of vulnerability and connection really early on, because it actually made me feel more secure in relationship. It felt like if we can talk about this now, then it feels like it locks us in, and then it protects me from pain, abandonment, and rejection.
Right.
So you have to be mindful of that stuff.
Fast.
We got vulnerable fast, but we also had
friendship.
we had been friends for 2 years. But in that, like, you don't want to exceed that, because when you add too much pressure and bring too much vulnerability and have too much commitment language too early, it can typically break the relationship. So you actually want it to go at a healthy pace, which you really have to reel yourself in over and over again and manage yourself and manage your desires, manage your expectations, manage the amount of vulnerability that you're bringing in order to have a healthy progression. Yeah. And so we want that for you. We want you guys, I hope that you guys got some good takeaways from this. I hope that there are really practical things that you're like, man, I feel like I understand that and I can do that. And if not,
well, also, if you have more questions, just post them in the comments.
Throw them down. And if not, and we hit on things that you're like, I really want to know more about that, look into our courses, click the link, watch our workshop. We dive into a lot of this stuff.
If you really like this video, you'll really want to watch our free training, the workshop. Yeah. Because we walk you through how to break the walls that are keeping you from connection to yourself, to God, and to men. And so if you want to go on a journey of getting freedom from your triggers, that'd be a really good place to start.
And I'll just say, like, you doing these right practical things to date well would only be a Band-Aid in a relationship that you're building if you're not going on a deeper process. Yeah. If you are just externally doing the right things and pacing yourself and trying to apply all of the tools, but you don't have a deep process that you can actually sustain this and be healthy and connected and show up and be self-aware, then it's probably going to end up breaking eventually. So you do you and your future person, you do them a huge service if you committed to going on a journey where you're taking ownership for your stuff, so that you can actually sustain these tools and not just talk the talk. We don't want to be people who talk the talk. We actually want to walk the walk and then talk about it later. Yeah. Right? So we hope that you enjoyed. I hope you got some good practical things. And if you did, then comment, tell us what was helpful for you, share it with a friend, subscribe. It really helps support our channel. And we'll see you next time. Bye.